Welcome to Who We Become, Life Beyond Change. I'm your host, Amanda Lentz. This is a space for honest conversations about identity, resilience, and what it really means to rebuild after life changes. Here, we share stories of loss and hope, of challenge and courage, and of becoming someone new, even when life doesn't go as planned and the future feels uncertain. Whether you're navigating illness, grief, transition, or simply searching for meaning after change, you are not alone here. And I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin. Welcome back to Who We Become. You know that story you've been telling yourself, the one that shows up quietly, usually in the middle of the night or right before something big? The one that says, "This is just who I am. This is just how things go for me." What if that story isn't the truth? What if it's just the version you inherited or the one you built to survive? I'm honored to have today's guest, JD Murgolo, the founder of Fragile Moments, a platform built at the crossroads of storytelling and mental health. JD has spent years inside his own story, navigating anxiety, depression, and the long, sometimes disorienting process of figuring out who you actually are when you strip away the performance. And somewhere in that process, he started building something, a space for people to slow down, tell the truth, and find each other in it. This conversation is going to go some real places. JD doesn't do surface level, and neither do I. So, JD, thank you so much for joining me.
Man, that almost like brought me to tears for a second there. I appreciate it. I'm done. That was it. That's all you needed to know. Wow. Thank you. I never most people's introductions are just that, like a surface level. And here I am using your words right there. It drives me bonkers. And I try and steer away that myself when I talk to people. I want to know that, sure, but we do that so often in conversations. So what do you do? And it's like, you just want to know how I make money. And I usually turn it around to people and I don't answer, this is what I do. What I do is far more interesting, I think, than, a banker's job maybe some days is. But I usually turn it around and I don't even answer that. I said, well, I like to listen to, Bob Dylan and, various other musicians. I like to draw, I try and the look on there was like, wait, I like that stuff, but I was ready for you to tell me that you change tires for a living or, like something like a career. And I think it's like it's like talking about the weather. To me, it's like you don't know how to talk to people. And that's frustrating for me because we lost that. And I want to get that back for people. Or you're just so uncomfortable with yourself, or maybe a mixture of the two, that it's like, this is a weird silence and I need to fill that. Can you believe it's raining again? Just say something. Just say something else. And you might make the person go, what, you're so weird. But in the end, you're probably going to get to a fun conversation that you just never would have got to if you just let it. And I'm not saying you can't be silent. If you want to be silent in the car with somebody, that's valuable too. But that kind of bio is perfect. I can't stand. You don't want to know what I do for a living. You don't want to know the color of my eyes, my weight. You don't want to know those things really. You want to know the next question. So do that one. That's more fun. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I think it's so true is that, as a society, we're so quick to say, oh, what do you do? And then we move on. And we never
Yeah,
really allow ourselves to get
that's
into
it.
the real story, the
Yeah,
depth. And I love how you reframe that into, here's what I actually do. I
yeah,
listen to music and I do
yeah,
this. And so I think I'm going to start doing that from now on. I'm going to start incorporating
yeah.
that into conversations.
I'm learning new tricks as I start to associate with the world after having two kids. I'm being
Yes.
an adult. But I probably did some version of it, growing up, and I didn't realize it, or I just, didn't know what to do. But I definitely can tell you that it bothered me. and I very famously said to my wife long before we thought of like houses and living that when I said, when we get to this position that we're in right now, and we were actually married 8 years as of Tuesday, I can tell
Oh,
you, I looked at her and I said, when we get to a house, if you want to paint the cabinets like any random color, please don't ask me that question. Like just do it. Like there are things that like I really will care about. And if I do, I will certainly tell you. But like skip past that. Like, like that's a simple nope, I don't like purple. And you move on. Like, please don't make a big deal out about these little things. And that's just how I treat a lot of stuff. It's not to say that those things like don't matter, but we kind of do the opposite with it. We fill a lot of time with those little things, sometimes to avoid the bigger questions, sometimes avoid the bigger topics. We very famously use the words, the phrase of like that person doesn't like confrontation.
mm-hmm.
um, to skip over that. And to me, it's those things that are definitely just a black and white, like yes or no, like, no, I don't like this color. Yes, I, want to go to the park later. Like, just say it, just do it, and then be done. And then you have all this time for other stuff. The other conversations that are probably waiting for you, or for the other person to hear, but it's not time. Did you get the groceries today? No? Okay, I'll go grocery shopping. And that's just your quick way of like, okay, I don't have to ask that big question again. I covered that with just a simple little one. So in some way, I've always been like that. I've just kind of started being annoying, maybe, I think probably is what my wife will tell you. In fact, I asked that on vacation recently because I'll talk to anybody, but I also know that I don't want to talk to you either. Like, I know it's not the time. Like, we need to be somewhere else. And I just finally was like, does that bother you that I like, will at least have a short conversation with, the waiter at our restaurant, or, the person at the Target checkout line? And she's like, no, I know it's what you enjoy. Um, but it's just being able to do that. And it lights people up when you start to talk. And I love that. And I hope that like, just by those simple acts, like somebody else walked away and go, you know what? I'm going to go home and have that conversation. That would be the big thing for me. But like, hopefully the next person that comes in line, they're nicer to them because somebody validated their existence by not just saying, oh yeah, I'm fine. Hope you are. Yep. Done. Bag my stuff. Be done, please. And hopefully it changed the next person, that it's like, they'll ask a better question to that person in line or the next person they interact with. So annoying, but maybe hopefully valuable somewhere.
No, I love that you are intentionally going beyond surface level and, allowing others to I like the phrase that you said, validate their existence,
Yeah.
because so often we just have these moments in passing. But you are
Yeah.
being intentional, and
Yeah.
ensuring people are seen, and
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
heard. And I'd like to start, since you've been very open about your journey, living with anxiety and depression, and I
Mhm.
think a lot of people can relate to that. Um,
Yeah.
but also, a lot of people stayed quiet about it. And at
Mhm.
some point, you didn't. You decided to be
No.
vulnerable. And so, can you tell me, what was that turning point where you realized that you wanted to speak about what you were going through?
Yeah. We've always, and I've been asked like of some version of that question a lot. So it's made me like at least like dig past, into my memory bank. And I had two great parents, that I wouldn't say like would shy away from emotions. They didn't necessarily like completely talk about them either, but it was never that, you hear that, or the gener like our parents, that was like, oh, you just didn't talk about that. I don't have any moment where I can remember like even looking at my parents and knowing like, there's something else here. And if I found a gentle way to say it, it came out. So I've always had some kind of, root system, uh, at my homes, that allowed me to say that. Never never as overt as I am with my children. And I think that's just because of what I've experienced. My wife and I, before we were this in our lifetime, we were Montessori middle school teachers. I've grown up in Montessori philosophy. And for those that don't know that, it's not a religion for starters. That's what first people think of, but it's a life philosophy way more than it's an educational philosophy. So I was brought up with the idea, and my children are 5 and 3, and they've already at 2 had conversations of like, how does that make you feel? And you can hear that in their conversations with us, and sometimes it comes completely backwards, and it's hilarious. But like they'll say, I forget what my daughter did on vacation, but my son did it like very similar, like when he was like 2, and he said that he sometimes feels sad because he needs to poop, and I'm like, I don't think that's how it works. You need to go to the bathroom though. But he used that word, and she did something similar like a week ago on vacation. It was like not quite what sad is like at all, but she knew that there was something that was there. You'll hear them use those words. Like, I feel sighted is what she'll say. So they have this idea of like feelings, and that's because somebody decided that, yeah, like, it doesn't matter that you're 1, 2, 3. I'm going to talk about happy and sad and ask you questions like, how does that make you feel? Not just jump and be like, oh, ouch, that hurt. We try very hard. I mean, it's very, gut reaction. Let's want to say that, but as best we can, we catch ourselves before we tell you how to feel. And so I know some version of that was how I grew up. And so it's just knowing that the outcome is going to work out so much better if I could at least tell you where I'm headed. My wife did not, and I don't want to say she like really grew up in like a closed household, but certainly that conversation, that generic, we don't talk about that. I've heard her say multiple times, in our adult life here that, this is something that like her mom will talk about with her, and so I know that the opposite was there, but I can see that what I do with her, she knows that I'm going to tell you. And I've said it numerous times to her, like, listen, I may get a lot of things wrong, but you can for sure know that I will tell you exactly how I feel. And it comes out in her. Like, she'll kind of like, run through something that's like bothering her. And then she has to preface it just to make safeguard it, be like, I'm just letting you know, like, and like, it's not something she's used to or not something she's comfortable with. And it makes me smile because it's like, well, okay, well, I got somewhere with somebody that you heard how I'm doing it, and it's making you feel like it's okay. So I never heard the words anxiety or depressed growing up. It wasn't until like, much later in my life, I probably heard it, being like used by my father, to describe him. And he very famously, like, said to me, I don't know why it like stuck or why he was describing like that, but he was referencing the fact that the nights were better than the days. They were like dark days and bright nights because he would go to bed and that's when everything stopped. And he didn't have to think, about what he was worried or stressed or bothered by anymore. And he had lots of reasons to be, but I never saw it, and I still don't see it in my mother. And I'm saying that, and here I am like skirting around my own big issue. My father passed away on January 1st of this year. In fact, I'm sitting in a room with his ashes in an urn, like next to me, and I intentionally put my workshop with that in it. Mom was very stressed about like, where are we going to put that? I'm like, well, you're going to put it in my workshop. There's no question here, because I'm okay with like talking about it. But I can see like now that like that's that huge weight, and I get to be part of this like strange club. I could see the reason as to like, why you want to say things out loud. And I understand like the real purpose, and not just, oh, you should tell somebody like that you feel sad. This is why, because when your whole like internal landscape gets like napalmed, but yet the rest of the world has no clue and you're asked to just continue to be, that's why you need to talk about something. And it, whether it's a simple phrase about, just use that as an example. Like, I remember my dad used to do this. That right there is your gateway for that person to say, I need to ask the next question. I don't need to ask about the weather. I don't need to ask about, what you're doing today. That's that's the other person's chance to receive it and go, this is making me uncomfortable. But I need to ask this anyway because they need they need to be asked that question, and it opens up everything. And I do it to my wife, and her father's been passed away for 15 years, and I probably didn't do a great job in the beginning because I didn't know how to ask questions. I know I did, but now I'll hear her differently, and I'll ask something about, and so I mean I just learned something new about him the other day. Um, so it's that. It's just being able to. It's always been there in some way, shape, or form. I'm just learning now at 45 to really hone it in as a skill to be able to say, here's why. And I've already hopefully begun with a 5 and a 3-year-old how that works. Sometimes it bites me in the butt, and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't really want to talk about like how that feels for me with you, but they level you at the same time, especially when it comes to grief. I'm finding out.
Absolutely. And I just want to acknowledge that, you know, your loss, and the
Oh,
fact that
thank you.
you are here holding space for others and
Yeah,
really teaching the next generation to
yeah,
be more aware. And I have
yeah,
seen that in younger generations where they are more attuned or in tune with how they're
yeah,
feeling and how others are doing. And so
yeah.
it is uncomfortable. It is,
It
it's
is.
it's
Yeah,
challenging to go deep, but it is so worth it when you allow
yeah,
someone that space
yeah.
to really open up and make that connection.
Yeah, and you can see it. I mean, my son is, I guess the rest of the world would call him like being, he's sensitive. We call him an empath. He's far better with his emotions than any adult I've ever met. Um, and it catches you because you forget that he's 5. Like you think that he's 50 most times, and then he does something like kid dumb, and you're like, oh, yep, still 5, got it. But we were very careful, but at the same time not with how we addressed, my father dying. Cause it was like equally like best friends. And so we knew that we would have to like say it to him a little bit differently than our 3-year-old daughter. But we didn't skirt away, and we never, it's a good way to like, like even just treat adults is like, we never, any tough topic, whatever it might be, or any question that was like, ooh, you're not ready for this yet. Anytime you feel like you need that kind of thing, our our MO has always been that we have to explain this to you. We just need to find the right words for you, not appropriate, not age appropriate, anything like that. The comprehension version of that. And so we've always been like that with the both of them, and you can see it with him that it just kind of has grown into this like huge understanding of the world, and like you just get I think the strangest conversation. That'll be a whole nother show, and another like art like book or something like that. My conversations in the morning with both of them, but especially him, that you could be end up talking about like construction vehicles on the side of the road, and then all of a sudden he'll ask you like why spacesuits are white, and it's like it's 7 a.m. I I think I know this answer. I don't know. But he's done that with his emotions too. And like we sat with him the day that we knew like my father was not going to come home, and it took almost like a week before he did die. But I looked at him in the face and I told him what was about to happen, and you could see his wheels turning. And I was like, oh man, he's processing what's going to come out next. And he just looked at me. He's like, so like Poppy's going to go to heaven? And I said, yep. And then he lost it. And I'm like, crap. Like I was trying to hold it together, and then I cried in front of him. And so that right there was like, it's the epitome of like the work that you do. And it works the same as an adult. It's like, okay, it's not that I don't want to talk about how do I help you comprehend that? And so the day that he died, I mean, it happened like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I went to the hospice house where my brother and my mom were. I came home an hour later, because hour or two later, because there's nothing else that I was, that was needed for me. I came home, took a nap, and by the time I came, I woke up. It was like that time for them to be up, and told him. And he asked a lot of questions from colors of the wall in the hospital room. Um, and then all of a sudden he just was curious if dinosaurs were in heaven. I was like, "Whew, thank you, because you gave me the chance to express what I needed to, but you also put me right back on earth for a second so that I can still be human versus like diving into a dark hole." And not that you need kids to process your emotions, but you need somebody that's going to do both of those things. Ask you the question that's going to make you like cry your eyes out, or let the joy completely out of your body, but at the same time go, okay, we have to go to work though. You know that. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. That somebody in your life is got to be that for you, and maybe you are that person for somebody. And this conversation maybe makes you go, "Oh, Susan asked a really tough question, and I was a jerk and just asked her what her favorite color was because I was uncomfortable." It's that right there, that we have to get better at. That's storytelling to me. Is that it's not just hearing what that tough moment, that tough part of somebody's season, a part of somebody's life, is. It's being able to bounce back, to that person, give them a hug, ask them a deeper question about it because maybe they only had 10 minutes to talk. It's that's the next step, in storytelling to me.
And you have you've talked a lot about the power of telling your story
Yeah.
honestly.
Hmm.
And we've talked a little bit about this as well, but you're really specific in that you don't have to be public, that your story can be just
No.
for yourself.
Yeah.
So, why do you think that the first act of truth telling is so important? And when someone actually stops editing their own story,
Yeah.
and starts to be real about it before maybe perhaps they have to acknowledge what's going on before they can go into those deeper
Yeah.
conversations with someone else.
Well, I don't want to like take credit kind of completely for the idea. I just kind of like expand upon it, but it's something that a lot of these bigger entities like, the Moth or StoryCorps, do as far as storytelling. It's this, no notes, just like it needs to have a meaning. It's not just like I want to be funny, or I need to tell something that's like scary. It's got to be something that, makes you feel, has some kind of like transcending moment, not necessarily like, oh, like there was fireworks in there. It just has to be something that I think like moves you. And I think the part that always like, has fascinated me is that it is this version of you that is no notes and no script, no idea, behind it. Maybe you have, some kind of like bullet pointed flashcard, but hopefully it has like just one word on it. And you look at that word and go, oh, and that blows into a bigger paragraph. I can't say that it doesn't take practice to go without a safety net, but
Sure.
hopefully the conversations that you're having with yourself, you've practiced that story and not necessarily like rehearsing in your head, but you understand the parts of it that are comfortable, to you. It's like we were talking before we like began that I believe that, your story, it should be told in some way, shape, or form, but you certainly have the right to reserve the pieces of it that still aren't comfortable yet. And I say yet because they should eventually come out for yourself, not because somebody needs to hear that you had this, excuse me, life shift and pivotal moment. It may not be that. It may just be the fact that you want to tell somebody that you really love sauerkraut and you've never told anybody that. To me, that's just as valuable as a story that you need to talk about the fact that growing up, you felt like you were, neglected and abused. The other like chaotic version of that. Those to me are equally valuable, just in the sense that it was something that you felt and felt that you wanted to say was important to you or happened to you, but nobody heard it yet. And so the saying it out loud part to me, it comes down to, the things that people want to know and the things that people need to know. And the things that people need to know are like very few and far between. But we kind of get that backwards because we're so consumed with the fact that like, I've got to hear everything. What happened there? I'm going to go research that. Let me Google this thing. And it's like, no, person kept it secret, not because they don't want you to hear it, because they don't like you. It's personal to them. It's something that's important still to them. And you don't have to make it seem like, you don't have to make a phrase that's like, well, and that's as much as I'm going to say about that. I'm sorry. You don't have to say that. Nobody will ever know except for you that you said everything you need to. So hopefully and I say this to anybody who comes into contact with me, when it comes to my storytelling work, that in the end, I have no clue if you're telling the truth. I can feel it. I can tell when you're not. But hopefully at the end, you walk away and go, okay, I feel good about everything that I said there. I didn't hold back, all those kind of common phrases. Hopefully you walk away knowing that you felt good about it. And not for anybody else, not for the performance end of it, for yourself. And I think that's important for us, that we do kind of get stuck in this performer like line of thing. And maybe younger 20-year-old version of me like thought opposite for sure. But as I've grown older, I think it can be a bad road for multiple reasons. You're starting to get down to the negative attention, as my wife would call it, not the good kind. People just want to know, like, okay, how much more tragic can this story get? And it's like, no, like, it's still somebody's story. So holding something in for yourself is good. Holding back is entirely different, though.
Absolutely. And you've built a real community around storytelling and
Mm,
people coming together and saying, "Oh, you too, me too," and having that shared space of
yeah.
whatever they're carrying. So what happens in those moments? Like, what do you actually see shift in someone when they realize, and I love what you said is, you don't have to share everything.
Yeah.
You can keep some things, but it does feel I'm sure it feels good when you're able
Yeah.
to connect. So what does that look like in your work?
The phrase that comes back to me that I still, after, at 6, 7 years of building this to the point that it is now, and to me, it still feels like I'm brand new at it, is when people at the end, either when I'm done recording or, done working with the client, or, writing an email, like, 3 days later, is that, the thank you for providing, like, such a safe space for me to share that. I have yet to figure out how to, like, say I don't know. Thank you feels gross to me, because it's like I didn't sit here, like, okay, how do I make a room that makes that work? And like, what's with let's make sure I have my notes on the side with like the key phrases to get them to feel that. I wish I had a magic bullet for it, but honestly, it comes down to just this, like, Occam's razor, like, it's the simplest answer. And it really is just, it's going to sound like I'm like joking, because as much as I've been talking already, it's learning when to not talk. And it's hard for me because I love to talk. But being able to realize that silence, that uncomfortable space that's happening, that version of it needs to stay there. It doesn't need to be filled. It doesn't need to be taken away. It doesn't need to be, if you're, hosting a podcast, it doesn't need to be edited out. That needs to stay. And I from my own just personal research of like listening back to conversations or like noting when the person said it, it's that part. It's not like, it's not hearing the question and going, okay, I'm going to dig deeper into that one. I want to see what you say here. It's realizing that what they just said, that was hard for them. That was enough for them, without, I don't want to say pressing, because that sounds like completely like the other direction. Like you're not being compassionate at all. It's just knowing that like what they just said, you're out. Like you're here just at the campfire listening to that person tell the story, or sitting across from them at the coffee shop. You're not here to analyze them. Like, you're not their therapist. You're not trying to take notes. You're not trying to give them feedback on how they just spoke because they're going to give that speech at a keynote. you're you're there to listen. And I know it sounds like strange, right? But it's that, and it's just, to me, it's one of those things that, like, you hear that the cliche phrase is all the time. And it's like, well, hold on, like, it's a cute phrase now, but like, the next step is doing something about that. And to me, that's what this is. Whether I'm like listening to somebody give an interview to me, I, like, even calling it that sounds gross. But from that to even just, a client like talking to me, it's the same. I feel like I'm having the same conversation, the same, steps to get involved with it. There might be a few differences as far as, like, the end result. Like, I'm not like editing the person's conversation as a client. But I treat them the same in the sense that you're just here to talk. You just needed that space. And I think that just comes out naturally in the end, that it's there. The way that looks when it comes to like a show may not be, flashy at all. There's, wait a minute, there's way too many pauses and silences. Where's the ambiance music? And I love those kind of stories too. I think there's versions of like storytelling that is, more, journalistic. I'm not saying that that doesn't have a value, but when you're doing this, your show or your, work is all about hearing somebody, that's it. It's hearing somebody and letting that breathe. And, hopefully that comes out in what, people hear from me, is it's like, he just left that pause in there. That's 3 seconds, like, what's going on here? And you realize, like, what's going on here is the fact that that person gave you something very personal, very relatable probably to you. And you just got an opportunity to not only just hear it, but now absorb it for yourself, versus like, oh, that was amazing. And then you're shot into an ad, or you're shot to another part of it, another question. It's like, whoa, 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 that was a moment right there. So I think it's just giving that. I think I don't want to say I'm good at it, but I know that I've gotten better at like just listening. Because I can't say that when I began that, I think nerves probably were, anxiety was in there. But I needed a list of questions. I needed a list of guides and to help me. And I don't anymore. And I haven't for a long time. I have people fill out information so I know where I'm going. But no matter who you are, whether I'm sitting down to talk to you like this, or you're sitting down to work with me, I don't look at what you gave me until about 20 minutes before it, so that my head is just as fresh as the conversation's about to be. And my questions are completely just a curiosity versus like, shoot, you didn't answer question 1 exactly how I was hoping for. Question 2 is out. And now I'm scrambling, and so I realized I was doing that, and people could feel it. I'm sure I never had anybody say it like that made me feel uncomfortable, or, I don't really enjoy our conversation. I've never had thankfully, anybody say that, but you can tell if somebody is like, this is a hard conversation, like you're reaching for the next step. So I think I've just kind of become comfortable, I think, with both ends of it, the talking and knowing when to stop.
And I think it's definitely a skill, a muscle you
Yes.
have to build. Just as we were talking earlier, as
Yeah.
you're teaching your children, to be in touch with their emotions and share their feelings. It's something you have to
Yeah.
continue to build on, because it's
Yeah.
not something that comes easily. And you
No.
have to be able to sit with that feeling of being
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and allowing others that you're speaking with to be
Yeah.
uncomfortable as well.
And we forget that with this space, especially, it's like, do you have the right hosting platform? Do you have the right camera, microphone? To me, like, that's fun and all. But in the end, like, do you, do you know what you're doing this for? Do you know how to talk to another human being? And like, this is very rare that I get to like be on the receiving end of this. So I'm like a kid in the candy store, like underneath my skin right now, because it's like I'm interesting enough to be heard, not just like, hosting something. But the last time I did this, actually not the last time, it was a couple times ago, but the gentleman that was like talking to me, like, before we began, like, he's kind of like looking around, like scrambled, and he's like, brother, He's like, do you ever like get to one of these conversations and like your notes app crashed and like you can't figure out like, like what you're going to do with the person? And I was like, how do I say this nicely? I was like, no, I don't have anything like that. And that's not to say like, well, I'm better than you. I don't have to prepare at all. I just wing it. I just have like become natural with it. But like the part that like, I mean, I was like, okay, well, you just opened up a can of worms for me because I could talk for days and you just lost your show because I'm gonna talk and you forgot what you were gonna say to me. But like the part that scared me the most was that you relied on like so much on something else to help you talk. And if you're doing that, you're waiting for the next thing. You're listening to me and going, okay, yep, I know what I can do. Let me hold on to that, and I'm gonna wait till he's done, and then I'll ask. And then, I mean, my kids are a great example all the time. Like they try to interrupt you, and it's like, well, hold on, and then you turn and ask them, and they're like, what were you gonna say? I don't know exactly, because you were so much focused on the thing that you were waiting on to get your point in that you forgot what the person was saying. And that's the things that scare me, I think, with when it comes to storytelling, just talking with people, just interacting with people. So we've forgotten that the first part of listening is listening. It's not waiting for how can I one up this story. I don't know what I was reading like the other day, but it had a couple examples of like how they treat stories. I think it was The Moth, How to Tell a Story, that their book. And it was that like they use this like that's what they like expect from people that talk up there, or just the way we talk in general. But it was like most people are waiting for a line to one up that their brothers, sisters, aunts, uncle did the same thing, or we're waiting for you to be done so we can share our own story. And like if you just stop with that, imagine the things that you could hear and like just be able to go, man, that's so cool. I had an experience like that, but I never felt that way. And you would have missed that because you were waiting how to respond, or like, how can I be
Yeah.
cooler? And how can I ask question two? Because I worked on question two for a long time. I really want to ask that, you forget to just, you're two human beings. Like you should be able to just talk about anything.
Absolutely. I do think that we're so accustomed to just listening
Yeah.
to respond.
Yeah.
Again, because it can be a sense of feeling uncomfortable when you do open up to,
Yeah.
to listen and to really hear someone's story. And
Yeah.
so, um, JD, as we close, I'd love to understand, in your space of storytelling, how can
Yeah.
people learn more about what you do and how can they find
Yeah.
you and really, get engaged with this, um, with more storytelling.
Yeah. So I recently, and I realized as you were like making this beautiful introduction, and I was like, I don't want to like, I realized like I filled that out before I have my own brain. I'm constantly rethinking about how to make things that easy for people to just go to one spot, because that dilutes the conversation too. That it's like, well, I just want to hear about what they just said. And it's like, you've got to jump through like five different links to get there. So I realized like the work that I do is no matter what, whether I'm talking about being a dad, talking about, like stories, just how they heal, or interviewing guests, it all is the same voice. And Fragile Moments just didn't, it felt like more like a project to me. And it's been 5 years since I began it as that. And it just kind of like bloomed into this. So I recently changed everything to a different name. It's Story House. And so it makes more sense as far as
I
what's
love
going
that.
on. All the same things as far as the information that you spit out, and change anything but the word. But you can find me at storyhousestudio.org, and everything lives under there. And I even go so far when it comes to like, having people understand things. And I know I'm completely like the other direction as far as like, this isn't like the way the SEO works, or this is a far stretch, like, way to people to understand it. But I'm 45, and I know that's very young, but I come from a time when all these ways of finding somebody was just as simple, as just what you were doing, without having to jump through hoops. And I'm sticking to that. So I treat everything as a living house, as my work, because every room in a house, and this is kind of fun that I I had no intention of doing this. As far as like moving into a house, it just works out very serendipitously that this is what happened. But every room in a house, if you really think about it, has its own purpose. Some are very obvious, as far as like kitchens and things like that. And I'm not talking about like bedrooms; those are just the definite. That's where you sleep. But your studios, and a lot of people don't have studios or workshops because not because they don't have the space, because they're trying to fill it with something else.
Hmm.
Living rooms, kitchens, porches. If you think about the things that are supposed to happen in there, that's how you can treat your life. The kitchen is not just preparing, like food, but that's a gathering spot. That's where all these like, great ideas are coming. Like as you're, conversing at tables, porches are just natural conversations with people passing on the streets, or just two people having coffee. Or if you're in the backyard in a porch, it's the same thing. All these spaces have different ways of like treating stories, from, seedling projects and gardens to full on, like living those moments in living rooms. So my site is built around just that idea that here's what's living in each room, and where to find everything. But anything, is all under that spot. Very easy to find for a reason, because I don't want people to go, well, that was cool. If they say that and go, where do you find that? And can't. And then you give up. Because I do. I think about that kind of stuff a lot. If it's really important for you to hear that story, you should be able to find whatever it is, because people don't have great attention spans. Something we need to work on, but you'll give up within like 3 seconds if you can't find that. So I try very hard to make sure that it's comprehensible, for everybody. So thank you.
And what a beautiful way to structure the work that you
Yeah.
do, and to bring it home, and
Yeah.
and truly bring it and liken it
Home.
to a
Yeah.
home, where there
Yeah.
are so many different purposes, but each one carries its own
Yeah.
importance,
We try we try and
and brings
inhabit a
something
space without really paying attention to what's going on. And I mean, I just wrote an article like last week, that like the architecture of real work is what I called it, but just kind of re-explaining the idea, but guilty of it myself. I mean, with all this, I mean, the garage is a whole nother story right now, but in my mind, I mean, we had this house a month ago, and just the way that like, other leases for apartments and things like vacations worked out. It took us a month before we actually moved in, but I was moving piece by piece. But from day one, in my head, I mean, this room alone, I was mapping everything, and I hadn't even lived in it. And I noticed myself doing the same thing in other rooms or in the whole house, but I also noticed my wife doing it. My mother, we chose to bring her along the house journey, so she lives with us. And that was a crazy piece for most people when they hear it, but for us, it's like it's family. But we
sure.
were all doing some version of the same thing. We were trying to create the space before actually like living in it. And I was like, hold on, like this, I have to think about slowing down. But I think we all, no matter what, no matter if it's a 2-story home or a 1 studio apartment, there's some version of that idea that I think is far more relatable than giving some clinical term to things, that you could sit there and go, oh, that's what this space is. And it may be like a 1 square foot, piece of carpet that you meditate on, but that's your porch.
Yeah,
So I appreciate that.
absolutely. Well, JD, thank you so
No,
much
thank you.
for
Thank
taking
you.
the time to join me today and sharing your
Yeah.
story, and holding space for
Yeah,
storytelling
absolutely.
as well.
Anytime.
And what really resonates with me from our conversation is what you shared about how we spend so much time trying to fix ourselves, or reinvent
Yeah.
or edit our stories. And what you bring is something much quieter, about finally telling the truth about who you've been, so you
Yeah.
can choose consciously who you want to become, and how you want to share your story.
Thank you.
And so, for anyone listening, you're not stuck in your story. You're
No.
just maybe the last person to realize that you can write the next chapter. So, if something in today's episode resonated with you, I invite you to sit with it, write it down, say it out loud to someone you trust. That's the work. It's not glamorous, but it's the only work that really matters.
Yeah.
And I'd also invite you to find JD's work. It's the kind of place that makes you feel less alone and know that there is a place to share your story. And so, thank you for joining me on Who We Become. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and keep becoming who you're meant to be. Thank you for joining me today on Who We Become. I hope this conversation reminded you that growth isn't always easy, but it is always meaningful. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow, rate, and review the show. It truly helps these stories reach those who may need a reminder they are not alone. Remember, what happened to you is part of your story, but it is not the end of it. You are not defined by what happened to you. You are shaped by how you rise. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep becoming who you're meant to be.